Title: The Fall of Karen the Terrible. It was the kind of Saturday morning that made you want to sip coffee on the porch, breathe in the fresh country air, and enjoy the peacefulness of rural life. At least, that was my plan. But life had other ideas. My name is Jackson Jack Carter, and this is the story of how one entitled HOA president turned her own life into a catastrophic mess. I live in Oakwood Acres, a quiet neighborhood with large plots of land that, for some reason, had an HOA. Most HOAs exist to maintain property values and ensure a harmonious living environment. Ours, however, existed for one reason only: to give Karen Sullivan absolute power over the neighborhood. And let me tell you, she wielded that power with an iron fist. For years, she had policed everything from mailbox colors to the height of our fences. She had even implemented a rule about garbage can placement after last year's so-called waste bin crisis. But if there was one thing she hated more than anything, it was my tractor. See, I owned a John Deere tractor, a beautiful, green, hard-working machine that I used on my 5-acre property to maintain the land. To me, it was just another piece of equipment. To Karen, it was the ugliest thing she had ever laid eyes on. That morning, after finishing up tilling a small field, I parked the tractor in my driveway like I always did. 5 minutes later, I heard the telltale shriek of Karen's voice cutting through the air like nails on a chalkboard. "Excuse me. Excuse me. This is a clear violation of HOA policy." I sighed, already regretting opening the door. But there she was, standing with her arms crossed, nose wrinkled in disgust, staring at my tractor as if it had personally offended her. "Karen, it's a tractor. It's on my property. What's the problem? It's an eyesore." The neighborhood standards require all vehicles to be aesthetically pleasing and properly stored out of view. I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, this is a rural zone. The HOA has no authority over agricultural equipment." Her lips thinned into a dangerous line. "I'll have it towed if you don't move it immediately." I chuckled. "Good luck with that." Big mistake. Because if there's one thing I should have known by now, it's that Karen never backed down from a challenge. An hour later, as I was watching TV, I heard the unmistakable rumble of a tow truck pulling into my driveway. Peering out the window, I saw Karen standing with her usual goons, Ted and Greg, along with a very confused tow truck driver. I stepped outside, arms folded. "Are you serious right now?" Karen smirked. "You had your chance, Jack. Now we're having this illegal obstruction removed." The tow truck driver, a stocky guy with a grease-stained cap, scratched his head. This is the vehicle?" He gestured toward my massive tractor. "Yes," Karen snapped. "Tow it immediately." HOA violation. The driver stared at her, then at the tractor, then back at her before bursting out laughing. "Lady, this thing weighs over 10,000 pounds. My truck ain't rated for that." Karen's smirk flickered. "What do you mean you can't tow it? You're a tow truck driver." "Tow it." The guy let out a chuckle. "Not unless you got a military-grade recovery vehicle hiding somewhere." Ted and Greg exchanged nervous glances. Clearly, they had not thought this through. But Karen wasn't about to let a little thing like physics stop her. "Fine. We'll move it ourselves." Now this I had to see. She turned to Ted and Greg. "Push it." I nearly choked on my coffee. They were actually going to try to push a 10,000-pound tractor with their bare hands. Ted squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and shoved with all his might. Nothing. Greg joined him. Still nothing. Karen stomped her foot. "You're not even trying." Ted wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Karen, it's a tractor." But Karen, in her infinite wisdom, had another idea. She spotted my ATV parked nearby. A rational person would have stopped here, but not Karen. "I'll just tow it myself," she declared, marching over to my ATV before I could stop her. She grabbed a chain, hooked it from the ATV to the tractor, and jumped onto the driver's seat like some kind of redneck Fast and Furious stunt double. The tow truck driver let out a low whistle. "Oh, this is going to be good." Karen gunned the throttle. The ATV's wheels spun wildly, dirt kicking up everywhere. The tiny vehicle shuddered under the weight of trying to pull something 50 times heavier than itself. And then, the tractor didn't move. But the ATV sure did. Right into Karen's own front yard. Karen hadn't realized it, but her precious lawn was still soft from last night's rain. As she floored it, the ATV sank deeper and deeper into the mud, the wheels spitting dirt everywhere. "Karen," Greg called. "You're stuck." Karen was too stubborn to stop. She revved harder. Bad idea. The wheels dug in even deeper, turning her yard into a mud pit. Within seconds, the ATV was completely buried. She had officially towed herself into her own yard. I folded my arms. Well, would you look at that? My neighbor Jim, who had wandered over by this point, let out a howl of laughter. Hey, Karen, need a tow? Karen, covered in mud, let out an unholy screech of frustration. But she wasn't done yet. Oh no. Karen still had one more terrible idea brewing. Fuming, Karen turned toward her two minions, her face now streaked with mud. Don't just stand there. Help me get out of this mess. Ted and Greg exchanged weary glances before reluctantly stepping forward. They braced themselves against the back of the ATV and pushed. It didn't budge. Karen, still seated, slammed on the throttle. Bad idea. The ATV's wheels spun violently, flinging a fresh wave of mud straight into Ted and Greg's faces. Gah! Greg coughed. It's in my mouth. Ted wiped his eyes, glaring at Karen. You're making it worse. Karen ignored them, too consumed by her own determination. That's when she spotted the HOA golf cart parked nearby, the same one she used to patrol the neighborhood like some kind of tyrannical mall cop. I'll use that, she announced. I shook my head, exchanging a glance with Jim, who had his phone recording the entire disaster. This is about to get even better. Karen stormed over to the HOA golf cart, eyes blazing with determination. She grabbed another chain and, without hesitation, hitched it to the ATV. Greg, now wiping mud from his face, hesitated. Karen. Not another word, she snapped. I know what I'm doing. With that, she hopped into the golf cart, revved the tiny engine, and hit the accelerator. The wheels spun. Then the golf cart lurched forward and immediately sank into the mud, right next to the ATV. Jim doubled over laughing. Oh my God, she's stuck again. Karen's furious shriek echoed through the neighborhood as she realized the ATV wasn't coming out anytime soon. Her goons, Ted and Greg, stood frozen, covered in mud and regret. Jim, my ever-reliable neighbor, leaned against my fence, wiping away tears of laughter. This is the best entertainment I've seen in years. Karen, however, wasn't done. She turned to her two mud-soaked enforcers. Pull it out, she demanded. Greg threw up his hands. With what, Karen? Our bare hands. Karen scanned her surroundings until her eyes landed on something else. The HOA's official truck parked a few houses down. It was a mid-sized pickup, often used for HOA inspections and light work around the neighborhood. She stormed over to it, grabbed the keys from her pocket, and barked at Ted. Bring it over here. Ted hesitated. Karen, that truck isn't made for. Now, she screeched. Defeated, Ted trudged over and backed the truck up to the ATV. Karen grabbed another chain, securing it from the truck to the ATV. Jim whistled. This is gonna be good. Karen climbed into the truck, revved the engine, and slammed on the gas. For a split second, the ATV budged, but then the truck's tires lost grip, spinning wildly before sinking into the mud as well. The back end lurched downward, burying itself deep next to the ATV. Jim lost it. He doubled over, howling with laughter. She just got the HOA truck stuck, too. This is a pile-up of stupidity. Karen's face was an unrecognizable mask of rage, but even she had to see the writing on the wall. Her yard had become a graveyard of stuck vehicles. Her ATV, the golf cart, and now the HOA truck. And the tractor? Still sitting there, untouched. I folded my arms. You should probably stop before you end up getting a helicopter stuck in there, too. Jim, gasping for breath, wiped his eyes. This is legendary. I swear. Karen, you've outdone yourself. Karen looked around, completely humiliated. She had dug herself into a pit she couldn't escape. And the worst part? It wasn't over yet. Karen sat frozen, gripping the steering wheel of the HOA truck, her knuckles white. Her eyes darted around as if searching for someone to blame. Her kingdom, her perfectly manicured lawn, her pristine HOA image, was now wreckage of mud, stuck vehicles, and shattered dignity. Jim, barely able to contain himself, took out his phone and pressed record. Karen, do you have anything to say to the good people of the internet? Karen let out a strangled screech and threw open the truck door. She stomped towards me, pointing an accusatory finger. This is your fault. You're paying for all of this. I folded my arms. Oh, really? I didn't tell you to try and tow a tractor with an ATV. Or get the HOA truck stuck in your own yard. Her jaw clenched. I'll fine you. The HOA will fine you for property damage. Jim let out a loud whistle. Oh, you might not want to do that, Karen. Karen spun toward him. And why not? Jim grinned and held up his phone. Because I just recorded you admitting that you're fining Jack out of spite. That's called an illegal HOA fine. Pretty sure the board won't like that. Karen's face drained of color. She lunged for the phone, but Jim stepped back. I think I'll send this to the HOA board first. As if on cue, Karen's phone rang. She snatched it up. What? A deep voice crackled through the speaker. Karen, we need to talk. Immediately, her shoulders slumped. Her reign was coming to an end. I smirked. Good luck with that. Jim chuckled, already typing away on his phone. Oh, and don't forget, this is going viral. Karen let out one final scream of frustration, then stomped off toward her house. Mud splattered up to her knees. And with that, the fall of Karen the Terrible had truly begun. Karen slammed the door to her house behind her, disappearing from sight. But the damage had already been done. Her once pristine reputation as the HOA's iron-fisted leader had crumbled in a matter of hours. And the best part? The HOA board wasn't just angry, they were furious. Jim, still grinning ear to ear, tucked his phone back into his pocket. Oh man, this is going to be good. I nodded. She's finally going to get what she deserves. Less than an hour later, an emergency HOA board meeting was called. A few of the board members, previously loyal to Karen, were seen marching up to her front door, their faces tight with barely concealed rage. Neighbors gathered on their porches, whispering in hushed, excited voices. Jim nudged me. Think she's going to talk her way out of this one? I chuckled. Not a chance. A few minutes later, Karen stomped out onto her porch, her arms flailing as she argued with the board members. From where we stood, we couldn't hear the exact words, but her face, red with fury, said everything we needed to know. Then, in one swift motion, Mrs. Caldwell, one of the longest-serving board members, raised her hand and pointed a firm finger at Karen. The universal "you're done" gesture. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Then, like a child throwing a tantrum, she stomped her foot and stormed back inside. The board members left her house looking smug, while Karen's porch light flickered off in defeat. Jim folded his arms. "Wanna bet she just got fired?" I smirked. Not even a bet at this point. The next morning, a letter was posted on the HOA's community board. It was an official notice from the HOA board. Effective immediately, Karen Sullivan has been removed from her position as HOA president due to gross misuse of authority, unauthorized fines, and reckless property damage. But it got better. Furthermore, all fines issued under her leadership are under review, and any illegal fees will be revoked. The neighborhood exploded in celebration. Homeowners who had suffered under Karen's reign of terror flooded the streets, cheering and clapping. Jim brought out a cooler and started passing out beers like we had just won a championship game. Karen, however, stayed inside. Her curtains remained drawn, her car remained parked in the driveway, and, most importantly, she stayed silent. For the first time since moving into Oakwood Acres, she had nothing to say. 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled into Karen's driveway. Jim nearly dropped his coffee when he saw it. No. Freaking way. I leaned against my porch railing, watching as movers loaded up boxes from Karen's house. She's actually leaving. Word spread like wildfire. People came out of their homes to watch the show. The woman who had tormented them for years was finally getting out. As the last of the boxes were packed, Karen emerged from her front door, sunglasses perched on her face, lips set in a thin, angry line. She didn't acknowledge anyone. She didn't say goodbye. She just climbed into her car, slammed the door shut, and sped off, leaving a trail of dust behind her. A cheer erupted from the neighborhood. Jim, ever the showman, turned on a speaker and blasted the song "Hit the Road, Jack." It was the perfect ending. With Karen gone, the HOA restructured, new, fairer board members were elected, and for the first time in years, Oakwood Acres became the peaceful neighborhood it was meant to be. As for me, I parked my tractor right in my driveway. Because I could.